Hello, and welcome to Season 3 of the Working While Homeschooling podcast, the podcast for workingwhilehomeschooling.com, where our mission is to help homeschooling parents make money, maybe even have a career, while continuing to homeschool and without losing their sanity. My name is Julie, and I am your host and resident career coach today. I want to thank you all for joining us and listening in. I hope you're doing well. Our 2021 calendar planner pages are designed to help you take control of your time so that you can organize your life and live it to its fullest potential. These downloadable pages are fully customizable. You can add your information directly into these editable PDF files even before printing. Calendar Planner is loaded with extras such as goals and brainstorming pages, project planners, meal plan, chores, important date organizers, and more. Designed to complement my working goals journal, as well as my setting goals and actually achieving them course, these calendar planner pages are perfect for those of you who are ready to organize your way to career clarity and success. On today's episode, we'll be speaking to Kim, a new homeschooler and a structural engineer. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a newer homeschooler, and I've been working as a structural engineer for almost 13 years now. I have a son that is 6 years old in kindergarten at home, and a daughter who is almost 4 working on preschool curriculum.
And tell us, what does a structural engineer actually do?
So I work for a private firm, consulting firm, and so we do building design. So we work with architects and owners to design the beams, columns, walls, whatever's holding the building up. So I've worked on everything from airports, museums, office buildings, hospitals, schools. Been able to work on a lot of different things. I do a lot of building retrofits of existing buildings for upgrading seismic capacity of buildings for earthquake, because I'm out in California, so a lot with earthquakes.
Well, tell us a little bit about your homeschooling experience and how you started that.
We started homeschooling when we started distance learning with COVID last spring. So we finished out distance learning in the spring and quickly knew it was not going to be for us, especially while I'm working, because it just was not flexible enough for us. So we started homeschooling over the summer and are enjoying kind of a year-round schooling and taking breaks when we need to. And we are just using a box curriculum and reading lots of books and doing lots of crafts and activities and enjoying it.
I know that you mentioned that you have been going remote for quite a while now, even pre-COVID. So how did you get your company convinced to let you work remotely?
Yes, I have been working remotely for about 5 years, at least partially or completely. After my son was born, I was eventually back in the office for the most part. It was not quite full-time, but I was fully in the office. Mostly once I became pregnant with my daughter, the commute was just becoming too much for me. And so I started negotiating working sometime at home and sometime in the office. And then after I had my second child, my husband travels for work a lot in a pre-COVID world. So he was often out of the country or on the other side of the country. So I negotiated just working from home part-time. That's what I have been doing. Before COVID, my children were in either school or preschool daycare type setting. My company was very flexible and worked with me on kind of figuring out a way to make this whole homeschooling while working thing work. They've continued to be flexible, and it's nice to be able to school when the school works and then working time works, and juggling it all at the same time.
How did you exactly set up that conversation with your employer to allow you to kind of continue to work remotely or to start working remotely? Were there certain parts of that conversation that frankly, made it work for them mentally? How did you help them kind of agree?
Yeah, I think starting it with one day at a time helped, because they were able to see that I was going to get the work done at home. So by starting with, okay, we still see you in the office 3 or 4 days a week and you're doing this one day at home, that kind of started to break down the idea and get everybody a little more used to it. It's been an ongoing conversation. There hasn't been just one meeting or conversation. We still do check-ins regularly to see how it's working, see how many hours I'm actually working, and whether we're going to keep doing more or less. And that's always kind of in flux as well. And so I think the ongoing conversation has been, I can get more done at home because otherwise I'm commuting in the car for 3 or 4 hours a day.
Right.
So I'm actually, I'm more productive at home because I have less distractions, even though the kids are here now. It's no different than being in an office with a bunch of people that you can be distracted by. It's my theory. And then the additional time of not having to commute, that's just 3 or 4 hours of my day that can be dedicated either to work or to my family. And it's so much less of a struggle to fit it all in.
It really is. I mean, when time is money, I always tell people it's time is money. and time I'm in the car is time I'm not on the phone with a client. So like, it's like, so you have to either compensate me for that time or I stay home. That's how that works.
Correct. I'm able to work very well with technology. We've got so many resources now for sharing with people wherever they are. We're often working on projects out of state as well too. So when I'm doing my own engineering and calcs on those projects, it doesn't really matter where I am, fortunately. I'm able to work with clients in different states and such as well remotely. So it's not that much different than doing it with a client that's 2 hours away.
And I know you mentioned in our previous call that this kind of has had some added recruitment benefits for your own company, right?
Yeah, I think it's a nice selling point to a lot of young engineers, and we've actually recently hired a lot of young female engineers out of college and such, and they do ask about how do people make this work once they have a family. Even since COVID's happened, I gave a seminar in our women's group about some of my tricks to working from home and being efficient and time management and such. And so they're able to, see that the company is very family oriented. I'm not the only one with young children that they've worked with to make this work. They're willing to be flexible as long as you do your job and get it done well. And so I think that's a great selling point for bringing in new young talent that wants to have some flexibility in the future.
So those can all be great benefits for those that are listening, wanting to have that conversation with their company and turn their desk job into a remote job.
Yeah, and I think my biggest advice is after you have that conversation, and even if you agree to a trial period on it, follow through, go above and beyond, show that you can do what you're promising to do, and then they don't have a whole lot of arguments left.
Structural engineering, I know that's, you kind of have to have specific education and training for that kind of role. What kind of stuff did you have to do to prepare for your position?
I went to college and got a bachelor's and a master's in my field. There's also licensing exams I had to take after a certain amount of work experience. And so it was a process to get here, but we work a lot with CAD and Revit modeling drafters we have on our teams. And that's something that can be achieved through a certificate at like a technical school or a trade school. And they're the ones that actually put together all our drawings. And we've had a lot that have, been with us for many, many years and are fantastic and know as much as many of us engineers because they've been working on these buildings for so long. So there's lots of ways to learn it. And then we obviously we're involved in the construction process. So there's a lot of people that work in the construction industry as in project management and such.
Fantastic. So let's talk the kind of time management logistical side of this. How do you actually do a job that is probably as demanding as a structural engineer job can be and still homeschool?
I've had to get much better at prioritizing. It used to make me very anxious when I had long to-do lists, and I'm learning how to compartmentalize and know what needs to be done first and what can be put off a day or two. And it's the same thing with the homeschooling. I have the list of we have to get through these things. If we have time, we'll do this stuff. And then it's just fitting it all in. I have lists everywhere. Just because I'm a person that I need a paper, I have multiple paper planners. And if I write it down, I do it. And that's just the way I am. So that's what works for me. I've never been able to use the digital calendars. It's just, I can't keep track of things that way. So I write everything down, I time manage. And I would say my biggest trick is my kids still they call it nap time, but nobody has napped in this house in years. But most days, if not all, they spend an hour to 2 hours in their room of just their free time. Today, they took little fact cards about animals and were coloring in their rooms, or my son's been knitting in his room or weaving. My daughter's got all her dolls, and that's just all of our time to be alone and decompress. And I can churn out a whole bunch of work in that quiet time.
What do your kids think about you working?
They are very excited about it often. They always want to see what I'm working on. They want to hear about the buildings I'm working on. My son has a few times jumped in on my calls with coworkers to hear about what kind of problems we're running into. And he'll sketch up his own design of what he thinks it should look like and how we should fix it, which is so fun. And we've even gotten him into a lot of construction type building projects as part of his homeschool learning. So it's very fun to be able to tie it all together and show them what I'm working on. And even as I've done work on museums, we've taken them to those museums in a pre-COVID world, and they get to see things that mommy built. And even now I pull up pictures. I'm like, oh, we're learning about dinosaurs. Look at these dinosaurs that I anchored to floors and such. So they usually have questions. They always want to know what's on my computer.
Do you kind of schedule homeschooling at certain times of the day? Do you block out time for that? everybody kind of runs this a little bit differently. Exactly when do you guys homeschool?
Typically, I try to homeschool in the morning. So we get up, we eat breakfast, we start school right away. And I just try to get through as much as possible in the morning. I'm not always able to control when work meetings are scheduled. So sometimes we kind of have to flex that around a bit. But if I don't have any meetings scheduled, I will start by 8:30 and chug through reading, language arts, and math as quickly as possible, cover all those main ones. And then most of our like science and history and stuff is sitting and reading and talking about things. So we'll sometimes take that outside or just sit on the couch and snuggle up to read some books. And then once they get through their core subjects, it's outside. I just let them free range in the backyard. We've got sandboxes and mud kitchens and sports activities, and I just keep the screen door open so I can hear them if they need me, and they get their outside time to run out their energy until lunch. So that's my goal every day. It doesn't always go that smoothly, depending on what comes up with work. This morning I was on work calls for maybe an hour, hour and a half when I was supposed to be schooling, but
it happens.
Then we have the afternoon to catch up with whatever we missed.
Right. That's the flexibility of homeschooling, is that you can work homeschooling around your life.
Yes.
So the house stuff, that's the killer for me, is dealing with like laundry and dinner and occasionally scrubbing a toilet. And, how do you work all of that in?
I have learned to let a lot of things go. I used to be much more bothered by messes and clutter, and I've learned that I can't do everything, which has been a challenge for me, but also is very freeing once you get there. So, But again, I prioritize. The toilets have to get scrubbed once in a while. So that's always like the first thing. The rest of the bathroom can maybe go a little bit longer. I at first over the summer was following a routine of like cleaning one room every day, which worked out great. And it meant the whole house got cleaned every week or two. But then as my work picked up and we kind of added more to our schooling, I have not had time to do any type of cleaning every single day. So it usually gets every week or two on a weekend. I just kind of go crazy on a weekend and clean everything on a Saturday or Sunday. I try to get the kids involved as much as possible. The almost 4-year-old and the 6-year-old take the trash out every week. They help empty the dishwasher of everything they can reach. They will put the laundry into the laundry machine and move it over. And so, that's homeschool kids. Let's learn how to do this. They love to help cook. So we've worked that in too. And we talk math and such as we're cooking. And now my son reads the recipes to me, which is helpful. It's a little bit here and there is the goal.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you have recently done like a conference on, some of your tips and tricks to others about working in homeschooling. What are some of the questions you get asked when people find out that you're kind of doing this very professional role and you're homeschooling? What are some of the kind of questions you get asked?
Oh, it's often like this. Why would you do this to yourself? I honestly, I have to say it's worked because it's been fun. There's times work is frustrating and there's times schooling is frustrating, but in general, it's enjoyable. I've enjoyed the extra time with my kids. I would say I'm very blessed that they're very easygoing. So they're pretty good with going with the flow of, oh, somebody's calling mommy, need a few minutes, go read or play or color. Yeah. And that's, everybody asks, the general, like, what do you do about socialization for the kids? I already get that, even though I've only been homeschooling during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
I have to remind them that nobody's going to school. But we've worked that in with Zoom calls, and the kids have gotten very independent with calling family members on FaceTime and Zoom and such. And so in some ways, they're interacting with people outside of our house just as much as they were before. It's just virtually.
Now, is there a particular homeschool curriculum that you've liked or that you have, you've been trying that kind of really works well for you?
Yeah, we started with Bookshark curriculum, and I was attracted to that because it was just all included. One big box shows up with all the books and all the lesson plans, which, knowing I was going to be working, that was attractive to me because I don't have as much time for constantly planning and sourcing books and putting things together. So that's our base curriculum. We have been adding in like unit studies for science. We've done a lot of the subscription boxes. We are working with a charter, so we have charter funds that help pay for some of the subscription boxes. So we've done everything from science experiment kits to reading and literature boxes that come with crafts that go with the book that my son reads. We actually have, the grandparents often do kits, like subscription boxes as gifts for the kids. So we have like a kids cooking subscription, and then we do like the Kiwi Atlas crates for learning about different countries and cultures. So we just kind of love having the base curriculum that I know I can always fall back on. That's lots of books, lots of reading. We love to read. We have, several books going as part of the curriculum, and then my kids have picked out several other books that we always have like 4 or 5 chapter books that we're in the middle of because they just want to be read to constantly. But we like being able to work in the little unit studies. And so we do Bookshark as our 4-day curriculum. And so on our 5th day, right now we're learning about the moon. We found a resource for studying moon phases and all the geography of the moon and such. So we're, waiting for the moon to come out at night to get our telescope out and start looking at it. So I love the freedom of homeschooling with that, of exploring their interests, and going whatever direction they're most into. My son loves history. All he wants to do is history. And so anything I can tie back to history, he's all in to learn about it. And they're constantly building forts. He's like, I'm building a fort. It's a house like they used to live in. And then this is where I would have my fire, and this is where I would make my food. And it's so fun to see them experiencing that and like interested in that. And it's something he wouldn't have even been exposed to at this age in regular school, but it's what he loves. So we dive in.
So imagine the listeners out there. Are there any particular words of encouragement or advice that you might have for potential working homeschoolers that might be listening today?
What I always tell everyone that's homeschooling or thinking about homeschooling, whether they're working or not, is it's not as intimidating as it seems. It sounds like so much that you need to do, but when you sit back and think about the time you spend with your children, especially at this elementary age, everything is learning. And when you start to think about it in a homeschooling mind, I've noticed I just approach everything we do a little bit differently. I maybe just add in a few extra like, hey kids, did you notice this? That I wouldn't have thought of including in our conversations before. Like I said, with the cooking, where it's like, hey, this is a whole, let's experiment if the 1/4 actually fits into the 1. And little things like that, just taking a few extra minutes and being a little more intentional with that time. That's all learning. You don't have to do this full box curriculum stuff that we're doing. We enjoy it, and that's what works for us. We don't have to do it all. I know I'm excited about all of it. I want to do all of it, and so I have to remind myself to pace myself that we have many, many more years. Fortunately, my children are still young, and the possibilities of the things we can learn together are endless. When you break it down to what you really need to do, it doesn't have to be that intimidating.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Now, as we wrap up our episode today, I want to thank you all for listening in. There are a ton of great podcasts out there, but you chose to spend your time here with me, so thank you. In the show notes, you'll find the links to my site, workingwhilehomeschooling.com, and all of the great ways you can connect with me online. Now, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please consider becoming one of my listener supporters by following the link in our show notes. A small monthly donation helps me continue with great content and interviews like you've heard here today on the Working While Homeschooling podcast. Your positive online reviews, subscribing to our podcast, sharing it with your friends is all greatly appreciated as well. And if you know someone that you think would be a great guest of our podcast, please let me know at julie@workingwhilehomeschooling.com. Thank you for listening in today. Thank you for Ken for being our guest. And everyone, please make sure you join us in our Facebook group for a continuing conversation on today's topic and beyond. I look forward to seeing each of you soon at our next podcast for Working While Homeschooling.